Hello everyone, my name is Jianfen. Thank you for coming to this presentation. Today I am going to talk about some earlier Chinese teaching materials which have been brought up a lot for their contribution to the study of Chinese linguistics, literature, history, religion, as well as culture. However, their potential as a pedagogical resource is rarely mentioned. Actually, as these materials were mostly designed to reach non-native speakers, they demonstrate useful methods of teaching Chinese as a second language. That's why we would like to examine these materials from a pedagogical perspective. Before I start, I would like to take a moment to ask questions to you. Whether you are native speakers, or learners or educators of Chinese, what part of the language do you find most difficult? Is it, what I'm trying to say is it pronunciation, the vocabulary, the grammar, or characters?
Well, I might be different because I'm a native speaker.
Okay.
I personally feel like grammar is more difficult for me.
Good, thank you. And
Characters are most difficult for me.
okay, that's reasonable. Tones, which is pronunciation part. Thank you.
Characters, word segmentation, dictionary lookup.
Okay. You? Okay. All right. Thank you. And
What's most difficult?
for you?
Yeah, students. Right. Interpretation, getting the right interpretation.
Okay, I can see that. From an educator perspective, I see. Okay, great. Thank you. We can see that in this room we have several answers to this question. However, in China, educators of Chinese heavily emphasize the learning of grammar, even to the point of considering it as the foundation of all language learning. There are lots of tests and competitions in China, and that Chinese educator might choose to take part in. And this test and competitions will help teachers gain access to certain privileges such as higher salaries and more career opportunities. And they require the educators demonstrate the ability to explain complex grammatical concepts. So this is a competition which has been held recently in China. It's called 研究生汉语教学微课大赛. And if we look at the list of 7 winners and the topic of their teaching demos which they recorded and submitted, we can see that all but one of the topics are about grammar. This is 这个方位词教学 and this is 纯现句. The second one is 纯现句, the verb with 着. And then 结果补语. And then 曾经已经 the difference between those 2 words. And 联动句, a sentence with a series of verb phrases. And the next one is 微信怎么用, which is the only one about culture. And the next one is also 一边grammar things. Okay. So here comes the question. Why would the learner ever want to learn grammar? To get even more confused, or only if it can help him or her to learn this language better and faster, right? So the grammar that is used for language teaching should be different from the one used for linguistic research, in that it should take a pedagogical approach. Now, since we mentioned linguistic and pedagogic grammar, I would like to explain a little bit more about these 2 concepts. So according to Xu Guozhang, a linguist and professor at Beijing Foreign Studies University, because of the different foci of emphasis, grammar can be resolved into sets of binary oppositions. I'm not going to read that. Okay, but we can see that linguist versus pedagogic is one set of these oppositions. I'm going to show you an example about the difference between these two. So many grammar books start with the description of part of speech, things such as nouns, verbs, adjectives, etc. And I'll show two different definitions of nouns coming from two different grammar books. Let's try to determine which definition has a linguistic emphasis and which has a pedagogical emphasis. Here's the first one. Can I read Chinese? 可以受数量词修饰，不受副词修饰的一类词叫做名词。Or if you don't understand, that's fine, totally fine. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, thank you.
I thought you meant to say, I'm sorry. Those nouns and those that can be modified by quantitative. That's natural words, but not the adverb are nouns.
Yeah, thank you. And the other one, 表示人或事物，包括空间、方位、时间名称的词叫做名词。
Translation for me.
Oh, okay, thank you. And which is more understandable?
Well, I mean, it's understandable, but maybe helpful.
Okay, so the first one is from a book on 语法讲义 by Judas. He is actually a linguistic grammar book. And the second one is from 实用现代汉语语法 by 刘月华. Right, modern Chinese grammar. So which one do you think is it has pedagogical emphasis?
I would imagine the second one has more pedagogical emphasis.
Because
it describes nouns as being words which point to people or things, including space, locations, and time. So it sort of breaks it down into things that students are likely to encounter, or things that students are likely to want to talk about.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So they use simple words to explain, and it's easy to understand for the learners from any kind of background. Right? Yay. Thank you. Okay. So Xu Guozhang, he the linguist we mentioned before, he listed out some points that linguistic grammar and pedagogic grammar distinguish from each other. They are different in several aspects, like I have a translation word, like goals, distinction, or classification, examples, as well as intended audience. So for linguistic grammar, the goal is to explain grammar's logic, but the goal for pedagogic grammar is to demonstrate usage. The distinction between different points in linguistic grammar are black and white, while pedagogical grammar tends to be vaguer with the focus of utility. There are very few examples presented in textbook of linguistic grammar when explaining a concept, but with pedagogical grammar books or pedagogical grammar books, there are more detailed examples meant for study. The intended audience of linguistic grammar is linguists and language enthusiasts. For pedagogical grammar, it's language learners from considering your intended audience is the most important part. Different audience lead to different goal setting, different ways of classification, and different ways of explanation, such as using more or fewer examples, and rearranging the presentation order of certain grammatical concepts. The goal decide what to teach, and the rest of them are about how to teach. So as for these earlier grammar books, what did they teach? I am going to focus on two books that most clearly represent the concept of what it means to consider your intended audience when deciding what to teach. The first one is a grammar book written by Spanish Dominican missionary named Francisco Barro, published in 1703. The English version, Grammar of Mandarin Language, published in 2000, I guess, yeah. And Chinese version, which is called Hua Guan Hua, published in 2003. So Barro's Grammar of the Mandarin Language has contributed greatly to the field of linguistics and cross-cultural perspectives, according to Matthew E. Chen in his article for the Journal of Chinese Linguistics, praised the book as being the first Chinese grammar worth of its name. This book was created with the purpose of helping other missionaries in their task of communicating with and evangelizing the local population. With such an audience in mind, the book includes very specific examples and phrases that could be used in a missionary's line of work. So let's take a look at its content. It started with a brief introduction of Chinese grammar, and then the introduction of Chinese tongues, including the pronunciation of certain consonants and vowels. And from chapter 3 to 13, he introduced part of speech and the way of forming sentences. Chapter 14 to 16 introduced Chinese courteous words, written language, and some social etiquette. And then the concluding part is a brief method for undertaking confessions. Specific for the missionary. And the other example comes to us from the book 字儿 written by Thomas Francis Wade, a British diplomat. I will show you some paragraphs from its preface so that we can understand how helpful the author was in choosing what to teach. Quite long, sorry. Could I have someone volunteer to read the first sentence, please? Yeah, thank you.
What Chinese is it that you want to learn, sir?
Sorry, this is just the
Ask the first sinologue of established reputation that I consulted. There is the language of the ancient classics and the language of more modern books, and the language of official documents and the epistolary language, and the spoken language of which there are numerous dialects. Now, which Chinese is it that you wish to begin with?
Yeah, thank you. Now you can see that he recognized the many different types of Chinese, including written, spoken, and various Fangyan dialect, right? So the question he asked is, what type of Chinese should you learn? Here comes the answer. So the answer is we need to consider the students as well as the purpose for which the student is studying Chinese. What duties does the student wish to perform in Chinese? What is student's goal? And now when considering his own book, Wade had a particular audience in mind. On this page we can see his intended audience was students at the British consulate in China. Their goal was to participate in consular duties, and for this, they needed fluency in both the spoken and the written language of the government at that time. So, considering these students' particular needs, the book was split into two large sections. Colloquial series, which is 语言字儿集, and documentary series, which is 文件字儿集. The first focuses on the oral language, while the second helps consular workers complete necessary paperwork in Chinese. So we've seen how pedagogical grammar books have a specific focus on an intended audience. In addition, what sets these two types of grammar apart from linguistic grammar, what sets this type of grammar apart from linguistic grammar is how to teach, as we talked about. To explain that, we are going to look into three different aspects. The form of classifying, secondly, the presentation order that they arranged, and the third one is the way they explain the grammar point. So firstly, their form of classifying. Linguistic grammar take a black and white, rigid approach to distinguishing speech patterns, while pedagogical grammar classified by utility. Let me explain by using interruptives as an example. We'll take a look at two examples from two different textbooks which introduce interruptives. First one is from 现代汉语 by Huang Guoru. This grammar book this is a grammar book for native speakers. It divided interruptive sentences into 4 categories according to structure features. The first one is 是非问, the yes or no question with a particle at the end of a sentence. Second one, 特指问, the question with interruptive pronoun. And the third one is a question with a specific pattern, verb. Right? It's got affirmative and active question. And the fourth one is 选择问. You have 2 options in a sentence with a conjunction 还是 in between. So this is how Huang Guoru divided interruptive sentence. However, Barrow's grammar elaborated on the usage of interruptive sentences and classified them into 6 categories. We can see above the names he gave to these categories. These are all his own words. This classification might not cover all functions of interruptive sentences, but they are more consistent with the communicated function of the language, and thus more suitable for the teaching of non-native speakers. And I also made a chart to compare Barrow's grammar with Huang's grammar, so we can observe the differences between these 2 approaches. We can see that Huang Guoru has fewer categories. This is because he separated the types of interruptives based on the components found in a sentence. Right? However, Barrow's classification system is pragmatic. It is based on the speaker's goal or motivation for asking the question. Although there are more categories, it is actually more comprehensible to the learner of Chinese. Thus, it is an example of pedagogical grammar. You might be looking at this chart and noticing something a little bit odd. Here, yeah. Yeah, so Huang Guorong's fourth category, 选择问, does not appear to have a counterpart in Laurel's grammar. This is because when I was making the chart, I worked with the examples Laurel gave for each of his categories, and it would reclassify them according to Huang Guorong's system to see where they fit. To my surprise, none of the examples Laurel used in any of his categories were 选择问. Well, I guess this just goes to show that even in a well thought out system such as Laurel's, deficits are unavoidable. Well, it'll make it greater if he could provide additional examples of this type of sentence or questions. But it's still a great one. Just as Professor Zhou Xiaobing from Centenary University notes, linguistic grammar focuses on the rules and the structure of the language as a whole, not spending time emphasizing or de-emphasizing certain points. Pedagogical grammars, on the other hand, take into consideration the needs of the learners, emphasizing frequently used expressions that will best enable communication and taking care to explain complicated structures in ways that the learners will understand. So another example comes from Ba sentence, a famously difficult grammar point for non-native speakers. We're going to look at one way the grammatical structure of Ba was presented and see if it has sufficiently considered its intended audience. So these 8 sentence patterns are from the textbook called Practical Chinese Reader by Liu Xu. And they are organized by the author from easiest to hardest. The author believed that adding different components to the Ba sentence is going to change its difficulty of acquisition. And more components make Ba more difficult for non-natives. But is it true? Well, so before I came here, I did a small survey. I asked some Chinese learners to give me a simple Ba sentence. These are the first ones that they thought of. 请你把盘子递给我，我把书放在桌子上，我把那只猫抱住。We can see that the first and second sentences are actually examples of pattern number 7, which was supposed to be very difficult. And the only sentence that follows an easier pattern is the third sentence, which follows pattern number 2, still not the easiest one. Well, he said the first sentence pattern is the easiest one. Sorry. 把要吃了. There is only a simple 了 after verb.
Simple,
Yeah. Yeah. So what's no difference? What is the symbol? Okay. What makes it simple or difficult? Yes, that's right. Two university professors from Centenary University, Li Ying and Deng Xiaoming, also confirmed that learners' usage and understanding of Ba sentences does not correspond with the chart from the Practical Chinese Reader textbook. In their research, they found only these 4 patterns in the learner's language, and pattern number 7 has the highest frequency as well as accuracy. supposed to be hard, it's supposed to be difficult. So it sounds like, according to learners, it is not the number of components in the sentence that has the largest effect on the level of difficulty. Then what is it? So I asked some Chinese learners to provide a difficult and complex sentence. These are their responses. 我把他的名字忘得干干净净。你怎么把它惯成这个样子？我把它当朋友。I was really impressed. They told me the sentence. I mean, they were great, perfect. So when I asked what made this sentence difficult for them, they all gave similar responses, stating that more abstract sentences were the most challenging. When the 把 sentence uses a concrete noun, which is involved a concrete action, like taking a book and putting it somewhere, that's easy. And with an abstract idea, like land that's forgotten, that this can cause complication for the learners. In other words, it is the level of concreteness of the sentence that determines whether or not the sentence is viewed as complex. However, this discovery that abstract 把 sentences are more challenging to non-natives is not new. It was presented in the textbook written in 170 years ago by a French missionary called Joseph de... Sorry, I don't speak French. Okay. He dedicated his whole life into his mission at Chinese study and wrote this book with the goal of helping fellow missionaries master the language. When introducing 把 sentences in his book, he mentioned 3 types in sequence, which are first one, 把纸扯得粉碎，把它拉到房内. In these examples, 把 may be rendered by to take. And the second one, 把一天功夫全废了，把它灌醉了. In this example, 把 does not properly signify to take, but rather denotes the action of the subsequent verb, which make it less concrete, little bit. And the third one, 把他把我认作真的，把那贼子当作好人. So in these examples, 把 often signifies to have or to consider as, which is very abstract. So he introduced them starting from the most concrete and leading to the most abstract uses of 把. According to his understanding, this order is the easiest for learners. Are they? Okay. So another example of how earlier textbook explained grammar in the pedagogical perspective, which is the last one I want to introduce today, comes from 自耳集, 语言自耳集, the colloquial series that we mentioned before. When the book is introducing interrogatives such as 是不是, it is obvious that non-native speakers were the intended audience. The book makes a point to give a detailed explanation regarding areas that would confuse learners because they are different from the learner's first language. For example, when the question 他来不来 is introduced, the answer is given as 他不来. A native speaker would not have any trouble understanding this example and would require no further explanation. However, the book goes on to mention that Chinese do not respond to these questions as many foreigners might expect, with a single yes or a no. It is emphasized that in Chinese, the answer most frequently includes a repetition or partial repetition of the question with the negative and affirmative prefix, which means when you want to answer the question 他来不来, it should be either 他来 or 他不来, 来 or 不来, and just 是 or 不. So this type of explanation takes a pragmatic approach to its analysis, and it makes it very suitable for teaching. So actually, all these examples and books we've examined together today represent only a small part of the resources available in Western Chinese teaching materials from this time period. So what can we take away from this? How can books written hundreds of years ago for students in a bygone era be applicable to us in the modern era? In fact, these writings represent the works of the first explorers of Chinese grammar. As some of the first Western learners of Chinese, they were personally familiar with the challenges and the struggles of a non-native. Their books were structured with the express purpose of delving into and demystifying what they considered to be the most challenging aspect of the language. So, as a teacher of Chinese myself, I hope to have the opportunity to continue my research on these materials in the future. I believe that the knowledge compiled in these books can help not only myself but also other Chinese educators structure our own lessons to make them more comprehensible and applicable to non-native students. These are my references. And that's all. Thank you. 谢谢大家. I also want to thank Emily Larson. She helped me for a couple of weeks working on the translation and English expressions. I wouldn't be able to do this without her help. Thank you. Questions?
So the easiest clause sentences are sentences that we don't need long to say. Is it true forms that go to so
Yeah. Yes.
That's easy.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, there are different ways to say without pa
Right.
at all, but we still use pa.
No, I'm not saying don't, is that, I just mean that's maybe the easiest thing for students to
Then
get.
that wouldn't be a pa sentence.
Well, yeah, well, that's easy. It would be when people say law sentences are disposable. You dispose of something or you do something to it. So if you say true,
Oh, that's
true that person, true fault that person, you're still doing the same thing given the context.
I'm not sure about that, but for the sentence that 书放在桌子上, it could be a response to the question like 书在哪儿?
Yeah.
But if you say 把书放在桌子上, that's a response to the question that what should I do to the book? Or what did you do to the book?
So what is determining the meaning is the context is it. So, true forms that goes on to mean for the books on the table. Right?
书放在桌子上。Yeah, it depends on.
Somebody comes in with a microphone and says,
If you're moving and a bunch of people come helping you and this, 书放在桌子上，桌子放在墙旁边的后面。Yeah.
I just thought, the easiest sentences are like, 书桌的放在桌子上 is teachable. I mean, you teach that first. The boss sentence.
But why we teach that first? Isn't it because it's
Depends on
more
whether
concrete?
Well,
Because you can actually, they can actually 书放在桌子上或者
when you're doing that, you're focusing usually on predicate.
Yes. Yes.
There's certain, that's what complicates it. Okay. Right. You don't say, right? It has to have
Something.
some kind of complex predicate.
Yeah.
For a sentence like 把手机拿出来 pull out your phone, how would you say that without a 把拿出手机来
Yeah.
That is farther removed from a non-native speaker's intuition, I think, because of just that strange word, 拿出 object, lie.
Well, there's
So I
another
say-
way to avoid use that. You can say 手机拿出来.
That's topic
Yeah.
with like a command comment, right?
Mhm.
Something about ba. I mean, clearly it's a high frequency pattern in Chinese.
Right.
So students have got to learn this and they've got
Right.
to use it, otherwise they're doing something wrong, right? Because it's so high frequency. But there's something about the tangibility of ba that just makes sense to teach that first. That once students can more concretely understand how ba works, then move on to those more abstract things. Because the abstraction is just a metaphor. Like you can't physically ba somebody's name and forget it. You can't pick up a name and then forget it completely. Right? That's
Yeah.
layers and layers of metaphor beyond
Yeah.
ba data behavior. Right? So I think by learning that more concrete thing, you can then move on toward those more metaphorical and symbolic uses of concepts, metaphorical uses of
Yes. Yes. It'll help to it'll help for students to master the pattern, how I could buy and the things and the actions that I'm gonna do all in one sentence. But sometimes maybe because we start teaching if it's concrete meaning, and that will makes it harder for students to understand the further meaning, which is less concrete. But actually, that is also highly frequency in Chinese.
You say shoe, that could be a general thing. All books go into it. But if you're holding books, if there's particular books, then you're likely to hear pop. Everything's followed by, it's already first, it's a
Yes.
definite, it's
Yes.
already old information.
It's like a book, not a book.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the difference between those two
Mhm,
sentences.
mhm.
But they do function in the same, because Chinese is, the problem with nouns in Chinese is not places and things, definite or indefinite, singular or plural.
We don't have that form, but actually,
But the reference to whether what you're talking to is there, it's just.
yes. It just
So
doesn't
it's
have
like, English is a very definite, fixed, essentialistic noun.
Mhm.
Chinese is a quantum noun.
Yeah.
It depends on whether it's plural or singular or mass or not. It all depends on the context.
Yes. Yes.
That's what, when they talk about nouns, that's where, if you look at beginnings, people who get to the point where they're using Chinese, but they're not too familiar with it, there are a lot of mistakes made in that area. And it's really difficult to correct them because the idea of the Chinese noun being substantially different from, say, an English noun or a French noun, or, any Indo-European noun, everything in the noun is telling you specific information about it.
Yeah.
So that's, and you say, what is difficult with nouns? It's that indefiniteness.
It's not.
If you correct it, it's like if I correct Chinese writing English, I spend most of my life changing to the
X or the links.
yes, all that. See, the Chinese have that same problem in English as the non-Chinese will have in Chinese, because how to refer to this nature of the noun in terms of whether it's definite or indefinite, or are you talking about many, or are you talking about few, or is it just one? All of that. Chinese are not very often confused by that. But the foreign student is often confused by that. I think it's just the fundamental difference between what is a noun in one language and what is a noun in another language.
Yeah.
So you found, I was very surprised to see these old texts. I had not heard of these grammar books before, so that was very cool to see. Is any of the Chinese, do you find that Chinese explanations of grammar are affected by those foreign-based texts, or do modern Chinese grammar books sort of ignore those and say, start over?
The first one I think of is Ma Chun. It was the first Chinese grammar book with the label. It was really in fact by Han Jianfen, the one that this one. I've looked into their, because I researched their interrupted system for my doctorate papers, and I found that they introduce interrupted particles almost in the same pattern, same way, use the same examples, and the grammar book of Martin, written later after that one. There are lots of evidence to prove that these grammar system from the grammar system from these Western teachers has a really great influence to the grammar of Chinese later. Thank you. That was a really good question.
One of the reasons that these have an impact is this is spoken Chinese. I mean, written Chinese up to a relatively recent time was Wen.
Yes, yes. And this one also have two different series. One is oral language and other one is he said language of book, which is written language. It seems like they all recognize that Chinese is different type.
It's like you think about Romance languages while Latin was still an influence. You had all these variations of Latin or Romance, and that they didn't have a grammar for them. Chinese, spoken Chinese, in many cases, you read, sometimes you read back that spoken Chinese it was determined what language you were talking, or what in Chinese it's, it's funny and there's dialect, but it's really a different language.
Right.
And so a lot of times, it's really hard to determine which actual oral spoken language is being talked about.
Yeah, so the fangyan we're talking about now, what kind of fangyan might be the common language or official language back in the history?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing you ever hear about Cantonese when you start teaching Cantonese, they say, Tang poetry sounds a lot better in Cantonese, right? That's the first thing you say. So, there's such a, the idea of actually a singular, like a void or a clause is relatively modern.
Yeah.
So a lot of times people learn in Chinese, it's like if you like Wei Childs or that a lot of their Mandarin is based in Nanjing, it's a Nanjing dialect. It's quite different.
That one, Laro's grammar is actually 19文化.
Yeah.
It says 文化语法, actually, 19 dialect.
So in a sense, that they say Chinese was late in having the grammar, but in a sense, the idea that somehow you had to explain one of these languages when there was kind of a throwaway. I mean, at one time, I imagine Chinese were like trilingual. I mean, for anybody functioning in China, you probably have to know more than one language. Right? And I have a friend who's older than me, but he thinks that modern young Chinese just don't control problem. Because he thinks that's very unusual in Chinese history.
Modern young Chinese.
Yeah, the young Chinese, they don't even know,
Yeah.
even if they go to Shanghai or something. Of course, that irritates him greatly. But the idea that we have that kind of fixed language everybody agrees upon is relatively modern, relatively new. Historically, not by the calendar. It's interesting. But I think, the Liu Hua, her grammar is basically right. So,
There are also less frequent to realize grammar.
yeah, the definition. So she has, for example, a noun could be a blitz. One thing in a foreigner, if you're a student of Chinese, you find that nouns aren't places, can't be places. If you say 书在哪, you can't say 书在桌.
That's called a location phrase.
桌子 is the noun, right?
And you have to put 上.
Exactly. But
After
the
that.
noun itself isn't a place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless it's another kind of noun, like Shanghai, a different thing. Something like that. So a Chinese noun and an English noun aren't the same thing. Yeah, it's like I said, that's the difficulty. Because people are trying. It's sort of like trying to explain quantum mechanics, physics, using old physics. It's just it's really difficult.
You need a new set of words.
Yeah.
Describe that.
I think that's how this
So that-
font weights. They don't say it means anything. 是单位词跟名词
Right, right.
上下左右，里外，教室里。
But, you know, in English, a noun is a place.
Person, person.
Put it on the table, put it on the chair, put it on.
And on is another thing.
Yeah.
In front of the thing. But in Chinese, you have to add on after table to make it a location.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the idea is that looking between these languages, I think the history is, it'd be really interesting to sort of compare some of these old books to the original grammar of, you know, like the language like French, or what is Latin, or what is the really one, Portuguese.
Oh.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time.
Sorry you had to bad weather.
Yeah, I'm sorry to, but still thank you for coming in this bad weather.
Thank you so much.